Alright everyone, welcome back. This is a project tutorial on lights, camera, background, and rendering. We're going to create a background for your subject using a complex mesh. We're going to capture a rendered image using your camera and at least 3 different lights. Oftentimes this is used as 3-point lighting. You want to use at least 3 lights for your scene here. We're going to talk about background colors and HDRI. We're going to talk about creating a backdrop. We're also going to talk about how you can use your camera, how you can use lights, and how to render and save a photo. All right, so your subject is basically going to be the same thing that you created in the past. You can use something that you've made before. If you want to create a new subject, you can get some extra credit by doing so. If you make a new model all yourself, or you can just use the furniture that you made from last week. You could do that too. Or you could use your hat. If you want to import an STL, you could import your hat. You can create a new hat. Or you can create a handheld non-violent object as well. And you could get that. The more you practice, the more things you make, the better you get. So I'm not going to say that, there's one specific thing you need to do. There's a few different ideas of what you could make as long as you use the tools that we've come to know and love so far. All right, that said, let's get into this. Here we are in Blender. We've got our basic cube. I'm just going to go up to show you that this is not altered at all. I'm going to go to File, New, and General. And this is our basic setup. You can see we have our camera over here. We have our light. And we have our cube, our trusty cube. So, first things first. Let's say I want to just change the background and nothing else. I don't really like this gray background here. I want to change this to something else. So to do that, you're going to see over here on the far right side of our menu here, we've got this thing that looks like a globe, like the Earth. It's the Earth right here. It's supposed to be. You can see some continents going on there. I'm not sure exactly which ones. It's kind of blurry here. Maybe that's Australia. Maybe that's Brazil. That's South America and North America. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, you click on this, and it will open up your world properties, which are right here. You can see that there's a surface thing right here. There's also volume and some other things. The first thing that we're going to play with is just the color right here. So for surface, the surface of the world's color, we can change that. If we click on this gray box right here, we can change what color it will be. And you can also change the brightness over here. So when you're changing colors in Blender, you're going to first choose the color that you want to use out of this slider over here, or this palette here, and then you can choose the brightness level of the color right here. So you can make it really bright or not so bright. That's really up to you. And when you do that, you're changing the color of the background of the world. And you're going to say, hey, McDowell, nothing has changed here. Well, that's because in order to see things that have to do with rendering, we have some different modes that we use to be able to manipulate this. And this is so that way your computer isn't always running at its hardest to be able to calculate all the lighting and all the materials and all the colors and textures of everything while we're trying to manipulate objects. Oftentimes you want to save your computer from all that effort. So we have different view modes for us to be able to look at these different things. We call them shaders. So if you press Z on the keyboard when you don't have anything selected, you're going to see this thing. If you're in object mode, that is, you're going to see that you can render your objects in different ways. There's wireframe, which is really useful for choosing objects all around, or choosing like vertices or edges or sides from all around an object. So if I click on wireframe right here, you'll see that my cube becomes kind of see-through, which is really useful because if I go into edit mode and I want to select all the vertices, I can now basically I can look through the object and select stuff that's even on the back side of it. So wireframe is really useful for being able to select. If I wanted to select everything on the bottom here, I would just kind of like change my view to see all the bottom pieces, and then I could draw a box to select everything, even the stuff on the back side. If I had my regular view, which is the solid view, when I select these vertices over here, it does not pick up the stuff on the back. So that's an important thing to know when you're working in just regular old modeling. If I'm selecting things, it's not going to get what's behind. If you want to get everything on a certain level, if you want to select everything from behind as well, you want to use the wireframe view. And now I can select everything from the back as well. But besides the wireframe view, you're going to notice that I can either press Z and choose my shader here, or up here on the top, let me go to my regular solid view. Up here on the top right, you're going to see these little circles right here. And we talked about this earlier for a short period of time. But here's your wireframe right here. There's your solid. Then we have these two right here. So this one right here will show the materials of your world. So if I click on that, you'll see that suddenly my cube has a little bit different of a look. And we'll look at how this works when we add some materials to this. But you can still see nothing really changes in the world of color as far as we're concerned. But this last one right here, the one that has what looks like a little light reflection over here, and it has these little jaggy marks on the bottom, this is your rendered view. And when you click on this, you're actually going to see the light that is involved with your project. And we can see here that because I have this light right here, it's giving off light and it's bouncing off the material right there. But over here where there's less light, it's being like shadowed. And actually what's happening is the world is sending a reflection up to it. Now I can see this color that I picked actually has some kind of meaning. Now the world is rendering my viewport is rendering what color I have the background. All right, cool, interesting. Good to know that that's how I can change my whole background color. Now, a lot of times we don't use background colors. This is something that you might do on a mock-up of something simple like a logo or something like that. But oftentimes people will use these basically 360 images. We call them HDRIs. And I actually posted in your resources folder. Let's go to week 11's resources folder. You're going to see this link to background environments. And this link will send you to this place right here, HDRI Haven, which is a fantastic resource because it's 100% free. Their license is Creative Commons licenses, so you can use these in whatever you want. You don't need accounts or anything. Just go up here to HDRIs, click on that, and you can choose all these different HDRIs to be able to make your background look really nice. You can basically, not only does it give you a nice background that you can choose from as far as what your world will look like, but also if you have reflective objects, it's going to reflect what that background looks like. So it'll look like your object is actually in this 3D space. It's really fantastic. I'm going to go in here and just go into the nature section and find something that looks pretty here. Let me see what I got here. I want something that actually has, okay, this is nice. I like this. It's got some like stars and stuff. So I'm going to click on this. From here, you can scroll down and you can download an HDR render here. So I'm just going to grab a 4K image here, download that. And now that I've downloaded that, I can load this into Blender. So now this is in my downloads folder. I just downloaded a 4K render called Kloppenheim 02 4K. All you got to do is look through these different things in the HDR Haven. There's a whole bunch of them out here for you. You can look at them by category. So if you wanted something partly cloudy or overcast or whatever you want, there's a whole bunch to choose from in here. So you can choose one of these things. I'll also grab a studio one just for the sake of having one. Let's see here. I'll take this one right here. That's cool. Download a 4K version of that as well. All right, there we go. Is it the same thing they use for Google Maps? It can be. Are you talking about when they do, when you go down to Street View? It's very similar to that. It's like a 360 image, yeah. There's a 360 camera that takes an image from everywhere around it, and that's how they create these images. All right, so now that I've downloaded that, I'm going to go back into Blender. And now instead of over here on the right hand side, instead of where I had color before in my world section here, where on surface, world surface, I'm going to click on where it says color right here, and I'm going to change it to environment texture. You're going to see that right here, environment texture. It's right underneath the texture area. I'm going to click on environment texture, and now I get this big pink screen. Okay, interesting. Not exactly what I was looking for, but there it is. Now, after we've chosen environment texture as the color of our world, you can go over here to where it says open, and you can open that texture that you just downloaded. So I'm going to click on open, and then I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and I'm going to find that thing that I just downloaded. Let me go to date modified. Here it is right here. So if I double click on this, now we can see, ooh, now I've got a background that is a 360 environment, right? So now I have the ability to make something, and I already have a nice background that I can use to take my pictures with. Cool. So this is only visible when you're in render mode, when you're in the render shading. So that's up here. Once again, that's the one that has like the little light glare off of the circle. If I go to materials, you're going to see that that all disappears. And if I go to solids, then once again it all disappears. If I'm in wireframe, it's not there. It's only there for the render mode. All right, cool. So now I've got a background image that I can use. Cool. That's step one. Now let's talk a little bit about how you can build a set. You can build something behind this in case I didn't want to have a background like this. Maybe I just want a regular old kind of picture, or I just want something that has a background that I can edit with my lights, that I can play around with my lights. So let's see how we can do that. I'm going to turn off this color background just for the moment, and I'm going to make my color something real basic. Make it like a green. That's good. All right, so let's see how I could go in and I could build a background for this. So to do this, I'm actually going to make it out of a single side. I'm going to use a plane to do this. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift A. When you press Shift A, this is how you can add an object into your project here. So I'm in object mode right now. In layout, just a regular layout object mode. I'm going to press Shift A, and it's going to allow me to add a new object. If I didn't remember what Shift A did, if I didn't remember that hotkey, you can go up here to the top left and go to Add, and from there you can find the same things. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a mesh. I'm going to add a plane. There we go. So now I've got a plane. It's inside my cube right now, but that's all right. I'm going to move it in just a moment. You can see that not only do I have the plane down there, but I have it up here in my scene collections up here. So you can see I have a plane. If I want to select it, I can actually select it up here. I don't have to click on it in here. I can actually select it up here in my scene collection as well. Now that I have my plane here, I'm going to scale it. I'm going to press S, and now I'm just going to drag outward to like make a bigger plane here. That's pretty good right there. All right, cool. And I might move this down by pressing G, which is the grab and move tool, and then Z to be able to move this up and down, up the Z and the Z axis. So I'm going to scroll down, put this underneath my cube here. There we go. That's good right there. That'll do. All right. So now that I have my plane here, what I want to do is I want to make it to where I have some walls that are going to peek up over the top of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode by pressing Tab. And I can tell I'm in edit mode because I have all these little tools over here on the side here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change what I'm going to be selecting. And to do that, if you recall, up here in the very top left, we have the ability to select vertices, edges, or sides. And actually the shortcuts for these are your number keys 1, 2, and 3. So that makes it easy to remember. I can easily say, oh, I want to select edges. I'll press 2 when I'm in edit mode. Or I can select faces. Or if you don't want to remember hotkeys, which is I don't recommend, you should learn hotkeys, but if you forget for whatever reason, this is how you can select them right up here at the top left of where the edit mode is. All right, so I'm going to choose edges. I'm going to select edges, and I'm going to actually select the two edges that are far away from my camera. Here's my camera right here, this cone, this pyramid over here. I want to select, if I'm looking in the same direction as the camera, I want to do the ones that are furthest away from the camera. So I'm going to select this edge right here by clicking and dragging a box over it. If I want to select another object and add it to my selection, I can hold down Shift on the keyboard. And now if I click and drag, I can select both of these edges. All right. Now that I have both of those edges selected, I'm going to press E to extrude them. We did this before. Look at that. If I extrude an edge, I'm basically creating a side from those edges. Cool, I can drag this to make it, in different angles and stuff like that. But what if I don't want it at a random angle like this? What I can do is I can press Z, and that says I want this to be extruded along the Z axis. Ah, there we go. So now I can make it go straight up or down. I'm going to put this back behind my cube here by dragging up here. If I wanted it to be a specific distance, I could also type that in. Like if I wanted it to be 2 meters, I could press 2, and now it's 2 meters tall. Or if I put 5, now it's 5 meters tall. I could put 10, and now it's 10 meters tall. I think I'm going to do 8 meters. That's pretty good right there. There we go. All right, so now I have a background area here. I've got my subject, which in this case is the cube. And then I have these background walls back here. Cool. How do you undo? Press Control-Z to undo. Control-Z. If you make a mistake, never be afraid of quickly just saying, oh, Control-Z, let me go back a second. And you'll go back in time. And then you can press E to extrude, press Z to go up and down. You can drag it up and down if you want, or you can type in a specific amount and press Enter, and you've got it ready. All right, cool. So now I know how to extrude a wall. Very cool. Devin, you should be able to do it, but you need to use your X360 to do it. All right, so now that I have my angles here, or I've got my set background here, let's see how we can actually change the color of this stuff. All right, so to do this, to change the color, we're going to stay in edit mode, but we're going to change to edit sides. So I'm going to look up over here, and I'm going to see instead of editing with edges, I want to edit the sides. All right, so now that I've selected sides, I'm going to choose one of these sides. I'm going to choose this one back here in the back. And just so you remember, if you want to see what the camera sees, you can go right over here to this camera view, this thing right here. Or if you have a number pad on your keyboard, you can press the number pad 0, and that will show you what the camera sees. This is how you switch from your view to the camera view very quickly and easily there. All right, so I'm going to actually stay in the camera view. Why not? I can do all this from the camera view. The X360 is the laptop that you were given, not the Chromebook, but the other device. All right, so even when I'm in the camera view, I'm able to click and edit stuff. So I'm just going to stay in the camera view right now, and I'm going to click on this back wall over here, and we're going to change what the color of this back wall is. So to change the color or the material of a mesh, the way you do it is you go over here to the right-hand side, and you're going to see this thing on the very, it's not always going to be on the very bottom, but here it is. It looks like a little circle with like a checkerboard circle kind of. And if you hover over it, you're going to see that it says material properties. So this is it right here. You're going to want to click on that circle down here on the right side. Click on this circle right here, and this will let you manage the materials. Now right now there's no materials. So what we have to do is we have to create one. Over here on the top right, it'll say new. Zoom out a little bit here. That's a little bit too much there. So if you look over here on the right hand side, you're going to see something that says new. So I'm going to click on where it says new, and it's going to create a new material. Right now it's called material 1 or material 001. You can double click on the name right here and change what it's called. I'm going to call it back left wall. There we go. And what do I want my back left wall to be? Well, I can choose what color I want it to be. If I scroll down here, the main things that we're going to deal with when you're working with the material selector, you're going to be using the select and assign buttons right here. We're going to be using that fairly commonly. There's a preview panel so you can see what the material will look like if it were on a sphere with some light over here. You can also choose what it'll look like when it has different types of shapes, like you can see here. You can try it on different things like cloth or liquid or the basic plane or different shapes here. But if we scroll down a little bit, you're going to see something that says base color, and this is where we can change the color. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on base color, and I'm going to change it to a nice red. There we go. Now you're going to see, hey, it didn't really do anything, McDowell. Once again, this is dependent on you choosing what shader mode you're in. So if I go into material shading, or if I go into the full render shading, you'll see that now this wall has changed. If I go to material, oh, okay, this whole thing is now red. Cool. If I choose the render one, oh yeah, it's red, but it also has like shadows and there's reflections from the light. Now, depending on how your computer is, how powerful your computer is, if you're working on stuff in render mode, it might be pretty laggish. There might be a lot of lagging going on. So that's why we tend to only go into render mode when we absolutely need to see how things are lined up. All right, so I'm going to go back into material mode. I'm just going to stay in material mode, material preview, which is this one, the one right next to render, right in between solid and render. There's wireframe, solid, material, and render shaders here. So let's say I want this wall to be red, but I want this wall to be a different color, right? You'll see that it took all of my stuff here, and it colored all of it at once. And maybe I want this wall to be one color, and I want this wall to be a different color. The way I can do that is I can now select a different wall. I'm going to select this wall back here on the right, and I'm going to make a new material. So to do that, over here on the right side, you're going to see something that says plus and minus. Over here next to your materials, you'll see right here a plus and a minus. This lets us add more materials. So I'm going to click on the plus to add another material. Then I'm going to click on new right here to create a new material. And I'm going to call this one back right wall. Back right wall. There we go. Now this back right wall, I'm going to change what its color is. So I'm going to go over here, choose a different color. I'll make it blue. There we go. Now if I want to actually make this object or this one wall this color, what I have to do is I have to select the face. So I'm selecting this face right here, the one on the right. And then I'm going to go over here and choose the color I want to use, the material I want to use. And then I'm going to go down to where it says assign right here. And when you press assign, it's going to change whatever you have selected. It's going to turn it into the color of the material that you choose. So you can see right here, if I select this wall and I press assign, or I choose blue and I click on assign, now that one wall has been changed into this material. Ariola, this will be the participation. You can go ahead and take a picture of this when we're about finished with it. All right, so if I wanted to add some more colors and stuff, I could do that. I could go down here and I could make another color. I'll say a new color. I'll make this one yellow. I'll call it the floor. There we go. And if I choose a color here and then assign it, or if I choose a side and then I assign it a material, you can see that you can have different objects or different faces to have different colors on them, different materials on them. All right, cool. If I go into my camera view, you can see now I've got all these different things. If I go into render view, I can see that now I've got this nice different color thing going on. Yes, kind of like a Rubik's Cube. Very good. All right, so this is cool. Let me show you a few things that we can do to make this even more interesting though. So now we know how to change colors. We know how to make a background color, more or less a background area. Let me show you how we can take this and add a little bit more modification to it to make it more interesting. So right now it's a basic room. We've got these corners that are hard corners. I'm going to show you something new to help us to make something even better. And we're going to do something called the bevel tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this object right here. I'm going to select these sides right over here, and I'm going to use the bevel tool, which is right over here on the left side. You'll see it's called bevel. You can also press Control B to activate the bevel. So if I press Control B and then I drag, let me see, Control B, if I drag my mouse up or down, you can see now that I have the ability to bevel out the sides of this. And on top of this, if you use your mouse wheel as you are beveling, if I use my mouse wheel to scroll up or scroll down, you can choose how many changes you want to put into this bevel. So I can round out the sides a bit. There's another way that you can do this, This is called the destructive way of doing this, which means that I'm altering all of my geometry here. I'm adding all these lines and loop cuts basically to make this bevel. If you don't want to do that, there's another way to do this, and that is to create a modifier. We're going to play around a lot with modifiers as we go on in the class, but I want to show you just for right now that you can add modifiers to objects to do some really cool stuff. So what are modifiers? Modifiers are like they're like Photoshop filters. They're special things that you can add onto objects to give them special properties that otherwise would be really complicated and difficult to come up with. So let's see how we can use a modifier to be able to make this backdrop look better. To do this, I'm going to select all the sides back here, and I'm going to go into the modifier section, which is right over here on our right hand side. You're going to see something that looks like a little wrench. This thing that looks like a wrench right here. The wrench is your modifier properties, and we're going to use these quite a bit. They're very useful. They're some of the most useful things that you can find in Blender. So I'm going to click on this wrench right here, and you're going to see that when I start, I just have this add modifier and everything's all blank. Now the way that these modifiers work, they're kind of like effects in Photoshop, or like layers. They're all layered on top of each other in Photoshop. It would be the same kind of idea as you having these modifiers. So if I click on add modifier here, you're going to see a bunch of different things that I could potentially put in. The first one that I'm going to do is solidify, because I want you to see what solidify does. So I'm going to pick solidify right here and click on that. And when I click on solidify, you're going to see that I suddenly have depth to this object. You can see that whereas before, when I didn't have solidify active, I just had 3 planes basically. But if I have the solidify modifier, watch what happens. I can actually drag out the thickness of this, and now I'm basically creating a thickness to go along with these sides. Now, oh my goodness, there's like a thickness to those sides. I once upon a time had just paper thin extrusions of sides here, and now with this solidify modifier, I'm able to like put thickness either inwards towards my object or outwards away from my object here. Very cool. If you don't like the fact that it comes up with kind of these beveled corners right here, you can click on even thickness, and that'll make it all the same amount of solid. Oh wow, cool. Now I've got this like nice solid background here. Interesting. So the solidify modifier is really good for making objects that you want to have thickness. You want to add some thickness to it. So if you wanted to make like a bent metal piece, you could just make a bunch of extruded sides, and then you could add a solidify modifier to make it thicker. Very cool. Very useful to use the solidify modifier. Now you can leave your modifiers just open like this, and you can edit them all one by one, or you can apply the modifier to the selection that you have, and that also is a way for you to solidify and keep your modifier planes all cleaned up. But for now, I'm just going to close. I'm going to click on this little triangle right next to where it says solidify, and I'm able to close all the options that are with that modifier. Now there is another modifier that's really useful. That is the bevel modifier. So I'm going to go back into add modifier here, and I'm going to check out the bevel modifier, which is right here. I'm going to generate a bevel modifier, and when I do that, check it out. Ooh, it's beveling all of my shapes on this particular object. Cool. And you can change the amount that you want it to bevel. If I wanted to like make it even more beveled, you can change the segments, which like changes the amount that it is segmented, and you can actually change the order in which these things happen. So right now in the modifier panel here, what's happening first is it's solidifying my background, and then it's going to bevel it. If I want to, I can reverse the order of these simply by dragging and dropping. Over here on the side, there's these little dots here. You can drag these to go in whichever order you want. So maybe I want it to bevel first and then solidify. Let's see what that looks like. If I bevel it first, now I can change the amount that it bevels. Ooh, look at that. I got this nice nice like curve here along the outside of my background. That's pretty nice. And if I change the amount of segments that I have to this, look at this. Ooh, I can make it nice and smooth. I can round this corner out real nice. Oh, that's great. So now I've got this background that I have different colors to, and I'm not only able to make it to where the background is different colors, but I can also round it out to make it to where my light reflections look really good when I'm taking pictures of my subject here. Cool. All right. So now we've talked about how we can make a nice background here. We talked about how we can create bevels. We talked about how we can solidify single sides to make them thicker. We talked about how we can assign materials to our objects. Let's go a little bit into our materials just so I can show you a few more things that are interesting to note. I'm going to click back on these objects here in the background and on the sides, and I'm going to go back into my materials because I want to show you a few more things that you can do with your material modifiers. That way we can learn a little bit more about the possibilities of what we can do here. So something that you're going to want to know about, there's 3 things that are really useful for us to use as beginners here in our materials panel. And those 3 things are, of course, the base color. You can also create a subsurface color, and we'll be doing this a little bit later. Right now, just know that there's 2 colors that you can kind of choose from and go in between really easily. You can have an object have a color and a subsurface color. But the things that we're really going to mess with a lot are the metallic property, the specular property, and the roughness property. You're almost always going to change the roughness. So let's check out what the roughness property does. I'm going to choose this blue wall and make the roughness property almost nothing. I'm going to make it like 0. And I'm going to change this red wall over here, and I'm going to change the roughness to be 1, all the way at the far right that I can get it to be. Now, when I get it to this point, you're going to notice something, and that is I'm going to just show you here. This blue wall, it doesn't have any roughness on it, and it makes it very, very shiny. You can see that I actually have, you can see the light bouncing off of this object because it is so smooth that it's like a billiard ball, and it's going to bounce all the light off of it. And as I change that roughness, you're going to see that less light gets reflected, and instead it becomes more like it's just a solid wall, like a drywall doesn't really reflect very much light, right? So this roughness slider right here basically determines how reflective the object that you have is. The roughness is something that we change on almost every material that you make, because sometimes you want things to be shiny and reflect light, and other times you want it to be rough and not really reflect light as much. So this is a really important one to know about as far as changing materials. Not only knowing your color, but also the roughness. Now, specular is another one that basically is how much light is it going to bounce off. If it's not very specular, it's not going to send any light back. And if it's very specular, it's actually going to send probably the maximum amount of light to be reflected back. So the roughness affects how those reflections show up, whether they're like concentrated or not. And the specular nature of your material will determine how much light actually it absorbs. So there we go. These 2 things are really good for being able to determine, do I have an object that's going to be metallic and really shiny, or is it going to be something that's like a rougher, just a paint? So we can see here that now as I move my camera around, you can actually see that the lights are being reflected based off of my point of view. Very important to notice these things about materials. All right, so we've talked a bit about materials. Let's talk about how we can actually take a good picture, shall we? So to take a good picture, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first move my camera. So there's a few different ways that you can move your camera. Your camera is this thing that's floating around here out in space. Looks like a cone, kind of. And to be able to edit it, we need to first get out of edit mode. We need to be in object mode. So I'm going to press tab, and now I'm back in object mode. And now that I'm in object mode, I'm able to actually move and manipulate these different objects. So first thing I want to do Actually, the first thing let's do, let's play with our lights. That's what I want to do first. So I have this one light that I have up here. I can click on the light directly if I want to, or you can go up here if you can't find your lights very easily. You can click up here where it says light on the top right of your panels here, and you can select your light. Now when you select your light, there's going to be a special panel that pops up down here, and it looks like a light bulb. It's going to look like a green light bulb right here. Now this green light bulb allows you to change that light's properties. We can make it a point light, which is what it is by default. We can make it a sunlight. We can make it a spotlight, or we can make it an area light. Let's check out what the difference is. I'm going to go into render view here, and I'm going to move this light. I'm going to press G. I'm just going to move it down kind of above my cube here. All right, there we go. So right now I have a point light, and you can see that basically it just emits light in every direction. If I move it over here, you can see that the shadows are going to move from the cube there, and they're going to be projected from the other side of the light that I'm moving here, and it just projects in all directions. If I change this to sun, we can now see, whoa, the power of the sun is very powerful. You typically want a sunlight very far away from your source. I'm going to move this pretty far away here. You can also change the power or the strength of your light over here. There's a little slider here. You can put in a specific number. If I put 10, the power of the sun is very powerful. So if I put 50, that's very powerful. You can see that the sun has a direction as well. So the sun not only has a place that it originates from, but it also has this line that lets you pick what direction the sun rays are going to and coming from. So there's like a little extra added modifier here. You can click on this little yellow bubble here to change that. We're not really going to be using sunlights right now. We're going to be using point lights primarily. So I'm going to go back to, oh, there's also spotlight. So spotlight has the same thing. You have the ability to change the direction and also the color of your light, which lets you like pinpoint how big do I want this light to be, where do I want it to go, what do I want its power to be. There's a lot that you can do with this type of light as well. You can change how big it will be. We'll work with spotlights a little bit later and sunlight as well. Right now, just worry about point lights. That's all we're going to be working with right now. With the point light, you can change its color. So you can give it actually a colored light if you want to. Interesting. That can affect everything in your scene if you want to have different types of colored lights, right? Yeah, that's pretty cool. We can very quickly change the colors of our lights. You can also change the brightness of your light very quickly by changing this shader panel over here. So cool. We can make it dark light or very bright light. Cool. Also, you can change the power of your light. Right here, you can put in a certain value. It's in watts. So if I put 2,000 watts, that's how powerful this is. Let me just reset this back to the middle, back to a white light here. There we go. All right, so if I have 1,000 watts versus less light, you can see that it fills my scene with different amounts of light. Now, a good idea of what to do is to use multiple lights. Oh, there's one more. I'm getting ahead of myself. There's one more useful thing, and that is the radius of your light. The radius of your light, if things are closer to the radius of your light, then it will add light from all over that region. So you see if I have my region real big, these shadows over here get less distinct. If I move the radius of my light to be smaller, then those shadows become more concise because the light is only emitting from this area right here. So it's a good idea to know how to use your radius if you want really defined shadows, or if you want less defined shadows. You have a way of doing that with your radius of your light here. Now let's say I want to have multiple light sources. McDowell did say he wanted 3 light sources, right? Well, the easiest way to duplicate objects while you're in Blender is simply to select an object, like the light here, and then press Shift and D. If you press Shift and D, then you're duplicating that object. So I'm going to press Shift D, and when you do that, you'll notice that my scene got brighter for one because I'm duplicating a light, but now I'm able to move this light wherever I want it to go. Right after I duplicate it, I can press a letter, like I can press Z, and that means that I'm going to move that light only along that axis. Or I can press escape, and I can then move this somewhere else. So I can press G and move it in the direction I want. I'm pressing Shift Z to move it along the X and Y axes, but not the Z axis. So here we can see I took another light, and I'm able to move it somewhere else. I'm going to move it over here on the other side of my shot here. So now I can see I'm basically making two shadows, right? I've got this shadow over here, which is being emitted by this light, and then I have this shadow over here, which is being emitted by this light. I also have on the far side of both of these lights here, you can see that a kind of double shadow was created over here because there's no light from either one of these lights coming over. So this is just showing you that you can add multiple lights into an area to really bring out different aspects of your models that you create. Maybe you have an area that you want to have more shadow. Maybe you want an area that you want to have more light. Easiest way to do that is just to take a light and duplicate it with Shift D and then move it where you want it to go. I'm going to move this along the Y axis here. I'm going to move this kind of back here. And typically you'll have two very strong lights. Like on the same side as your camera, you want to have two strong lights. And usually you want to have one not as strong light behind your object, which gives it some highlights. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to turn down the power level of this light that's back here to make that shadow less noticeable. But now it's going to give my object a little highlight back here. It also makes the back over here, the background, have a little shininess, which looks kind of nice. Cool. So now I've got this nice object here. I've got 3 point lights here that are making these nice different types of shadows here around the outside of my object. Everything looks great. The only thing that I got to do now is I want to be able to move my camera. So let's talk about moving your camera. There's a few ways to do this, and there's actually a really good tutorial in the Blender tutorials that'll show you how to do this. But let me show you a few different ways that you can do this. First thing that you can do is you can select the camera itself up here in the top right where your scene collection is, and you can move it directly that way. So I can press G to move it, and now I can move it where I want. The problem with this is that it's kind of hard to tell where is my camera really pointing, right? Where am I actually looking? Well, a good thing to do is to go into your camera view first. So I'm going to click on this little camera logo right here. You can also press the numpad 0 on your computer. You can click that, and now I'm seeing from the viewpoint of my camera. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to move this around. So now that I'm in the view space of my camera, I want to select my camera up here in my scene collection. Make sure that you do that first. Select your camera that you want to use. And now I can actually move it around. So if I press G and then I press Z, I can move it up and down in the Z area, right? So I can move this up and down. If I wanted to move it along the X axis, I could press G and X, and now I'm moving along the X axis. I can press G and Y, and I'm now moving along the Y axis. I can also press G and Shift Z if I want to move along the X and Y axis, but not my Z, not my height. So this is really useful as well to be able to move around my camera. You can also rotate your camera. So if I got this kind of where I wanted, but I wanted to rotate it, I could press R, and now I'm rotating my camera. If I press R and then Z, I'm rotating just around from side to side. So that's pretty useful, right? I can rotate from side to side. There's also a helpful thing that you can do with any object in Blender. If you press the N key, N is in ninja. If you press the N key, you're going to see this pop up, which is like a little quick menu that you can open and close to be able to affect objects in your scene. So there's a transform menu right here, as you can see. I can change the location of my camera, the rotation of my camera, and you don't really need to change the scale of your camera. Just know that you have your location and your rotation here. So if I wanted to do that, I could actually use these little menus here to be able to specify where I want to move my camera. This is a good way to be able to be precise about this as well. All right, cool. Another way that we can move the camera is if you have, this is only useful if you have a keypad. That is, that you're on a computer that has a keypad, has a number pad. And the way that you could use that is, let me show you here. This is how I typically use the camera. You can move your, just move your viewport where you want it to go, where you want it to be, where you want to take a picture. Like let's say I wanted to take it from this angle right here. I can now press Control and Alt. Let me type this into the chat here. You can press Control and Alt and then the numpad 0. And this is one of the best hotkeys for doing camera control. If I just put my viewport where I want it to be, and then I press Control Alt 0, now that's where my camera is. It's right where my viewpoint was. Now this is really useful because you know, I might just want to position where I am with my regular camera. Now that I've gotten used to where this is, I can position my regular camera where I want, and then I can just press Control Alt 0, and now that's where my camera will be. So very useful. This is one of the best hotkeys for getting your cameras ready. All right, so now that I'm able to move my camera around, I'm able to do my lights, I'm able to create backgrounds. In fact, let me change my background here back to that world background, that image that I showed you. That way I can show you how it works with things that are reflective. I'm going to grab that environment texture that I opened before. This is what's cool about this render mode. If I have objects that are very shiny, like let me take this object that I have here and go to my materials here. If this is very shiny, that is, it's not very rough. When I render this out, it's actually going to get all the reflections from the area around. All this stuff back here. You're going to see all the different reflections from my different light sources, but you're also going to get reflections from the background that you choose, which is really cool. Really useful to have that kind of stuff. All right, so let me tell you how to render things, which is the last step of what you need to know in order to complete this project. In order to complete this project, you need to have a rendered image. Now, how does a rendered image work? Let me just make this rough again. There we go. How does a rendered image work? Well, first thing is you have your camera placed where you want it to be placed. Then you press F12 on the keyboard, and it's going to take a picture of where your camera is right now. So I'm pressing F12, and when I do that, woo! All right, I have this image right here of wherever my camera happens to be. Cool. Now what I want to do is I want to save this image. So I'm going to go up here to where it says Image, go down to where it says Save As, or press Alt-S or Shift-Alt-S to be able to just quickly do this. And then you can save this in a particular place. So I can save it in my documents, or in my downloads, or in a folder that I've specified. On my desktop, I have something called a modeling folder, so I'm just going to save it in there. And I'll call this background cube. There we go. You can change your file to be in different formats. If you go to File Format, you can click on this to change if you want it to be something else like a JPEG or a bitmap. Or if you want to have a lot of detail, you can save it as a Targa, a raw Targa. That's to get like the ultimate quality image that you can. You can also change your compression if you want your file to have really good quality. I would suggest having your compression down to 0 if you're saving in PNG or JPEG. Now that I've done that, it's going to save it as a render. I press Save As Image, and now I have an image that I can turn in that I've all completed. Awesome. I have 3 lights. I've got a nice background here. I've used different textures to make my background, and I am ready to turn this in as both a blend file and my rendered image. I'm going to go up here to File and Save As, and I can save my Blender thing here. I'm going to call this Background Cube. Background with Cube. And I'm going to save this as a rendered or as a Blender file. So I'm just going to save this in the same place that I saved my other one. There we go. And now I can turn these both in to get full credit on the project for this week. I hope you have fun creating backgrounds. don't you don't have to create it just like I created here. You can create a background of your own. Try making something of your own. Now that you know how to bevel things, you can make a cityscape background. You can make something with a tree in the background. You can make various types of backgrounds. I just want to see that you know how to make a background and you know how to use some lights. All right, everyone, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you have fun with this. I can't wait to see what you come up with, and I will check out what you make when you come back into class on Thursday, or I'm sorry, on Friday. On Wednesday, we're going to show off the projects that we made last week, and we're also going to watch a little video on something cool. The furniture was due last week, Brian. I think we talked about that, but you can still turn it in for credit.